Yeah.
ever since you started talking about the whole common ancestor prediction thing, I'm wondering, did you see that they found a fucking nightmare of an animal? It was it's the I guess it's an ancestor to both spiders and scorpions, and it looks like it, and it like legit nightmare stuff. I mean, this is something that you would think that, like, I don't know, some kind of horror master would come up with, but they found it in amber, and I think it was over in Asia, maybe. Uh,
Oh, I think I have that paper. Is it Chimera arachne?
I think so. It sounds right
Yeah.
because I mean
I
it.
haven't read the paper yet, but I have it. Yeah.
Yeah, the image of it in the amber, it looks so gnarly. Like if you run up on that, like in the woods, you're just like, I've come to the wrong fucking neighborhood.
Like Harry Potter with the giant spiders everywhere. Yeah.
I don't know, but you talking about common ancestor and everything like that reminded me of that, and I'm kind of curious, how do you feel about like crocoduck animals, like, when creationists bring up like, well, why don't we have some kind of dog, cat, human, baby type animal out there?
Man, bear, pig.
Bear pig, yeah.
Yeah. Um. Well, what that tells me when people ask for stuff like that is that they simply don't know how common ancestry works, which is funny because the people who always pose challenges like that claim to know how evolution works. And then you have to give this long explanation why, for instance, the crocoduck, like, no, the crocoduck shouldn't exist, and if it does, that would falsify evolution rather than prove it, because birds are from this lineage that split from, or this Archosaurian lineage that split from crocodiles, which are this other Archosaurian lineage in like the late Permian, and so they both went these long different directions, and if somehow a crocodilian managed to mate with a duck, well, that would be ridiculous because that would because what we know about genetics would be would really have to radically shift, but also the mechanics of that would be very difficult, I would imagine, but that's just me. Uh, um, but yeah, it's just and then what I think is really funny is that there are some people out there who say like, oh, we do have the crocoduck. It's like a Sinornithosaurus or something like that. It's these like feathered dinosaurs, and they'll say that's the crocoduck. I think that's kind of funny, but a little off the mark. It still brings me some amusement though, and
Yeah.
that's what really matters.
Now, I never thought about using those particular animals to be like, oh yeah, this is the crocoduck. But I mean, normally, whenever they say those kind of things, I can't help but to think of like a dog that poops out a raccoon, and then the raccoon throws up a cat or something. Because I mean that stems from something in the Nye Ham debate. Because at one point in the debate, Nye was like, "Look, if this were true, like the animals on the ark and everything like that, they would have to produce like 11 new species a day or something like
Hmm.
that to get the variety of life that
Yeah.
we have now on Earth." And that's just ridiculous. And so every time I think of how they argue those things, I think of like just animals pooping out new animals every single like minute that they get off the ark. It's just like they just start secreting new species, and it just, I
Yeah.
don't know, it just
Yeah.
seems ridiculous.
Coming out of their pores and whatnot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, it was I thought that was a pretty good point that he made. And what's really funny about it is, if I remember correctly, Ken Ham said there were somewhere between 14 and 16,000 kinds,
Hmm.
but I believe they say you can get all the way down to something like 700 kinds on the Ark, which is really the opposite of helping their argument because they think for them it helps because there's fewer numbers of them on the Ark, but
Right.
that's more work for genetics for the speciation events that are evidently happening every few hours of every day. It's like by lowering the numbers of kinds that were on the ark, you are increasing your problem. You are not decreasing the problem. Um, and it kind of goes back to, well, they don't really know. They don't know what a kind is. They don't know how they could count the number of kinds that there were. They have made exactly zero effort into figuring out the genetics of each archetype or whatever it is. They just don't know. They have made zero progress towards any of it. And part of the reason is it's all bogus. There's no evidence that there was an archetype of each kind 4,000 years ago, because was it 4,000 years ago or like 5,000 years ago, whatever it was. But yeah, there's no evidence for any of it that there were these bottlenecks or any of that crazy crap. It just flies in the face of genetics.
Yeah, I have to admit, like, them being able to deny like scientifically known things and to special plead their way out of it is just truly astounding to me. Like, that level of cognitive dissonance requires like a black belt or something, to be quite honest. Like, I got a black belt and cognitive dissonance is what they need.
Oh yeah, and and it's like I was saying earlier. I kind of think some of them do more than we think accept evolution, and that in knowing how evolution works, they're able to formulate their weird little arguments or ignore the data or whatever. And like I said, I do think payment comes into it, probably in part. Although they may all be sincere, they may all be sincere. They're just, these creationists, but I have my doubts, at least about some of them.
Yeah, I feel the same way about flat earthers. Like, I feel like, not that because they don't really have any kind of money or anything, to do with it, but I feel like some of them are just like, they're just really sophisticated trolls, and I'm wondering if maybe that is the situation with Ken Ham. Like, he's so far into it that he just can't get out. He's like, fuck it, might as well do it.
Couldn't get it to fly in Australia, so I'll go to America.
Yep. Well, to round out the interview, which if nobody has gone and subscribed to Jackson yet, definitely do that. But I want to ask you, like, to the best of your ability, could you tell me, like, either the best argument against evolution or just the least worst? The one that is not the worst, but it's kind of like the top of the pile of shit.
Huh. Well, let's see. What I generally think of when I think of arguments from creationists that are difficult to debunk are the ones that are often couched in a lot of technical terms. If it's like, here's this, if it's a lot of technical terms, or it's like some mathematical argument, I can't really do that well with a mathematical argument, but a lot of times they try to focus on like some biochemical process, and they'll throw out all this jargon about the biochemistry of it, and it's a lot to wade through because you have to know what this part is, what it does, what this part is, what it does. And so it's almost like the best kind of argument they could present is one that is incredibly niche, so that a lot of people will have trouble trying to debunk it,
Yeah.
Because if they present something that relies on a common understanding or a fairly common understanding of genetics or geology or something like that, then it's really not hard to go in there and say, okay, here's why this argument is bogus. But I don't know. I mean, usually when I read their articles, they're not couched in a lot of technical terms. They dismiss a lot of data offhandedly. And so it's more when they go for the niche stuff that it's not harder in the sense that it's more, it's not like it's more difficult if you know all the stuff than to debunk a normal article. It's just more difficult to approach the article because there's so much stuff you have to come with. Do you understand what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. Sorry, I'm sitting here shaking my head yes, and I realize that you can't see me. So
yeah, but yeah, and so that's my thought. If they could somehow, if they could somehow predict a fossil that's totally out of place and by all accounts, matches up precisely. Like if they found, the bunnies in the Cambrian, or like an elephant in Triassic strata or something like that, if they predicted it based on like the flood model, and they went to this specific place, dug down, where there's Triassic strata, and we dated it using radiometric dating and found out, hey, this is, 240 million years old, that would be important. If they could predict something like that, that would be important. And I think that would have us evolution people asking a lot of questions. And it would also cause us to take them more seriously, I think. But the fact is they don't have anything like that. There's nothing. When we do find surprising things, it's never something that's like just absolutely mind-blowing. We have to start over again, at least not recently. When they found out that like Homo floresiensis is actually more closely related, or is actually probably like a group of Homo habilis. That's interesting. But we don't have to completely rework, the entire human evolutionary tree because of this one study. It's interesting, but it's not overthrowing absolutely everything we already knew. And so creationists would have to present some data point that does just knock over everything we already do, and they have absolutely failed in every respect to provide that in any field. So that's what would make me take them more seriously.
Okay. No, I love how you answered that question. Now, would you consider like the irreducible complexity? Like, would you say that is kind of part of that group, or do you think that that's a little bit under?
So far, there have been lots and lots and lots of claims of irreducible complexity. My next video will be my cap on irreducible complexity, because I've kind of hit that argument with 3 different videos. I did one on giraffe, on the bacterial flagellum, and the eye. And so with the irreducible complexity argument, as you know, it's like, well, this thing can't evolve by these small successive changes over time, because at some point it would have been completely non-functional to its host, which means, boop, it can't evolve, whatever. The only problem is they've claimed that for like anything more complex than like salt crystals. And so, whether it's like ribosomes or topoisomerase or the giraffe's neck or the brain or the heart or the flagellum or the eye or whatever, it's all these different things, or blood clotting system. That's another one of the popular ones. But in every case, scientists or biologists are like, hey, let's go take a look at these structures. And they find out, no, here are the genes that are involved with this structure or whatever it is. Well, hey, turns out you can make, topoisomerases this way, or ribosomes could evolve this way, or something like that every time. And so if we could find something, and that's another place, if we could find something that was irreducibly complex, then yeah, I would also cause a lot of questioning to be done of evolutionary theory.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think that, anytime we've been met with that, though, it's been easily explained. And just like you were saying, you're kind of going through the most popular claims now, which actually I had never heard of the whole blood clot thing before. A few videos back, this guy had said, oh, well, if you think of a mousetrap, blood clotting proves creation. And I'm just sitting there like, wait a second, what?
Yeah, the mousetrap. Someone did a little trick with the mousetrap where they were like, well, if you take away this little part, it still makes a nice tie clip. And so even the mouse or the mousetrap isn't ridiculously complex. I remember that. Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, so it seems in a lot of ways they've kind of backed off from these macroscopic structures. They've backed away in large part from these different animals that they thought were of, extreme perfection or whatever. And so they're more focused on, hey, here's this little biochemical process that goes on. We got it now. This couldn't possibly evolve. And the problem with irreducible complexity is a lot of times it's pretty much like, hey, here's this thing. I'm going to assume it couldn't evolve. Like photosynthesis. Couldn't evolve. Well, actually, there's a lot of work that's been put into understanding how photosynthesis works, actually involving thermodynamics, that thing that creationists say, hurts evolution. And so actually thermodynamics is pretty great. But yeah, they usually just kind of look at some structure or function or whatever, and they're just like, wow, how cool. Couldn't have evolved. God did it. No explanation, just cuz. And then they avoid the technical literature, and they don't really care to look at it all. So yeah.
I love the laziness of them in general. It astounds me, really. Well, Jackson, I really love that you came on here and talked with us a little bit. And I hope that you enjoyed it too. I'm hoping to have you on the channel soon because I deal with evolution on a regular basis, so I'm fairly certain I'll be able to use your help.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. You want to tell everybody where to find you at, like best places and whatnot?
Well, I'm on YouTube, as you pointed out earlier. My channel is just my name, Jackson Wheat. I'm also on Twitter, Jackson Wheat 1, all one word. The number 1, and so that's where you can find me on Twitter. Yeah, I also do Facebook sometimes. I think it's also just my name, but yeah, you can find me in those 3 places.
Okay, awesome. I'll have all of those links down below if you want to go and check them out. And I hope everybody has a lovely day, night, weekend whenever you happen to be watching this. Definitely give Jackson some love here over on his channel. Let him know that Godless Engineer sent you. And I guess we'll see you heathens later. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.